Hi, this is Kathy Tibbles with WordPress Barista, and today we're going to talk about security. So I get this question a lot about how on earth am I hacked? You can tell you're hacked because there's links to other websites, or there's spammy links, or there's just a bunch of odd looking code, or sometimes it brings the whole site down and you can't see anything, or you get redirected to a different page. We just call it all malware because it's just very bad. And I have a few tips for your WordPress security. Now, contrary to common belief, you do not need a plugin. So let me say that again. You do not need a plugin for WordPress security. Now, people say WordPress is insecure. That's not true. Let's just take a step back and look at it. Is WordPress secure? Well, there are people trying to hack it, okay? And they're trying to hack it just because it's WordPress, and WordPress is the most widely used software online. So if you get to be the hacker that managed to hack the most widely used software online, it's some prestigious hacker-licious thing. So those guys are trying to hack. But the other side of that same coin is that there are thousands of developers that are always fixing problems and making WordPress better. So because it's so popular, there are people trying to hack it. That's true. But because it's so popular, there are more developers as well. There are more developers than any other software out there. And it's open source, so there'll be thousands more added all of the time of people who are developing that software. Open source means that we can see the code. I can look in WordPress and I can see how it's written, and I can change it if I want to. If it's a proprietary piece of software, then like Microsoft programs or a lot of programs online, if it's not open source, I can't see it. I'll never be a developer for it unless I am an employee of the company that made it. Make sense? The best explanation for most of us is just that people are trying to hack it, but there's more people trying to make it better and safer and more secure. So if you follow these best practices we're going to talk about today, you will not be hacked. I have not had anybody in 6 years who has been on my VIP service that has been hacked, if they follow these rules. If they're adding plugins and doing all kinds of things that I have no control over, well, of course, that's a completely different story. But most of the clients on the retainer service, I do the plugin uploads for them. And I do all of their backups, and so they're secure. So let's go through the 3 best practices that are super important. And if you do these, you do not need a security plugin, okay? Number 1, you have to update all of your software. So now by update, I mean there's the WordPress that's on your site. There is all the plugins that you've added. There is a theme. Now there's all the plugins that are on your site that you're not using anymore. There's themes on your site that you're not using anymore. There might even be code in a widget that you're not using anymore. Like we create a widget, we put in some ad code, we are done with that ad, and so we move that widget to the unused widget area. If your code is in there, then it's not used, and you might have forgotten about it, but it's not up to date. So it's really important that you remove all the plugins you're not using, remove all the themes you're not using, remove all the widgets you're not using, and make sure that every single piece of code, every single little piece that goes into that fabric of your website is all sealed tight. There's no room for malware to get in. The only way to do that is to make sure that it's up to date, because we find out all the time about issues and security things, or the writing of the code gets a little bit tighter. We figure out, oh, okay, we could actually make that bit of code even that much better and more safe than it already is. And so a new version is put out. You get a little red circle on top of the plugin tab or the theme tab that lets you know there's something there to be updated. So update it. Very important. Now, of course, there's update procedures. You can find those on my blog. Number 2, don't use plugins that are insecure. That sounds obvious, but any plugin by its very nature creates a tiny bit of insecurity because you have this fabric of your website, and every time you add a plugin, it's like adding a patch. So you've cut a little hole and you've glued something in there, but now that fabric isn't quite as strong as it was before. And so the more you add, the less strong that fabric becomes. Does that make sense? It's really important to use as few plugins as possible. Make sure they are by reputable sources, that they are well maintained, that they're downloaded at least 1,000 times. That by maintained, I mean they're updated a couple times a year at least. And or, the plugin author. And trust their coding is up to par. And number 3, so update is number 1. Use good plugins is number 2. Oh, and we recommend no more than 14 plugins. And number 3, use tough passwords. So here's the thing. People think that it's more sophisticated than this, but it isn't. There's a lot of malware that gets into your site simply by guessing your password. And they don't do it because they've got your wallet and they're going through looking for your kids' names. They have a dictionary that has millions of words in it. There's probably not a million words. Thousands and thousands of words in this dictionary. And all they have to do is use a robot, a spider, a little program that goes around to all the different WordPress websites and tries them all. That's it. They just try different variations of letters. That's why you have to use letters, numbers, and a special character for a really strong password. Okay? So it's very important that you use a strong password. Do not use a word, like a word from the dictionary. Don't use a word, name, date. Use a random one if possible, and use LastPass to save it, or any password keeper. Okay, so best practices. Update your site, be careful with your plugins, and use a strong password. If you do those 3 things, you will not need a plugin. Now, there's one thing that I didn't mention at the very beginning. All of it depends on your host. So you need to be on a reputable and a strong web host. Your host puts a whole bunch of different website accounts, like your account and somebody else's account, onto one server. And they separate those accounts. But if they're a reseller, sometimes those separations aren't strong enough. So if someone else on that reseller group gets hacked, you're very likely to get hacked. So if you're a small site, it's really important to be on a strong, reputable host. If you are a big site, you probably don't have to worry about this because you're likely on your own server or VPS. So I think I've rambled on enough. That is how to keep your site secure, and you shouldn't have any problems. You really shouldn't. If you'd like to be on our retainer and have us take care of this for you every month, it's only $47 a month, and we look after this and a whole lot more, and you get a nice, neat report that tells you exactly how you're doing every month. So feel free to get a hold of us at WPBarista.com. And thank you for watching.